A two-lane ribbon cut through high desert where the wind sanded everything down to truth. A sun-faded Ford crawled that ribbon with a bed full of tools and a cooler that sweated like a nervous witness. At the passenger window, a silver-gray German shepherd rode upright, reading currents with a soldier's patience. The map called the destination Redwater, a mining dot the world had filed underused. The odometer ticked like a slow metronome for a man who counted distance to keep other numbers quiet. Sagebrush broke in uneven applause around rusted fence lines. Far off, a slag hill hunched like a sleeping engine. The truck rolled on, humming an old barracks hymn, carrying a veteran who had traded noise for a deed, and a dog who considered silence a suspect. The sky went wide enough to swallow regrets and still want more. Jack Rayner wore the years blunt side out, clean haircut grown soft at the edges, jawline nicked by field razors, hands that defaulted to ready. In the cab, receipts and permits formed a paper barricade against bad decisions. The deed sat on top, corners browned as if it had held a flame too long. He pushed air in slow, out slower, the way medics once taught him to ride pain. Ahead, sun hit broken bottle glass until it glittered like patrol flares. Behind, the life he had set down remained unspilled for the first time in too long. The dog shifted, talons ticking the rubber mat, nose lifting to a scent that did not belong to dust or diesel. A mile marker leaned like a tired sentry. Redwater waited beyond a cattle guard and a memory no one had volunteered to keep.
Rex Canine owned the cab the way discipline owns a parade field. Muscles ran under coat like wire worked by careful hands. Ears flicked independently, parsing wind from rumor. He sampled air through the open vent, separating sun-warmed metal, dry petrichor from last week's storm, and a filament-thin thread that raised the hair along his spine. Jack read the posture and adjusted nothing, a trained agreement between two lives that had learned to trust the quiet alerts. The truck climbed a low rise, and the horizon opened like a drawer. False fronts, collapsed rooflines, a water tower tilted in permanent shrug. The dog looked once at Jack, then back to the town. An inventory done, a conclusion filed. Somewhere in that dead grid, a living shape had exhaled recently. The engine idled down as if to hear it. Redwater did not greet, it presented itself like a report. Boarded windows, a church with a cracked bell, a saloon that remembered footsteps in its floor, a grocery where sun-faded labels still confessed prices. Jack parked where Main Street widened to turn wagons and later hearses. He stepped out into heat that made old paint smell like almonds and apologies. The deed sat in his back pocket like a question he should have asked twice. He walked the center line while Rex quartered ahead, nose low, tail level, a needle searching for true. The mine head frame pierced blue, cables slack as nerves after a tour. The place looked abandoned and felt paused. Dust behaved like it knew better than to settle too soon. A blackbird clacked from the water tower, and the echo mapped corridors under the earth.
First night fell fast, the way it does in empty places. Jack unrolled a cot in the old general store, swept aisles with a push broom that raised history into the beam of a headlamp. He ate from a can with the detached gratitude of a field ration and logged minor victories. Windows latched, door shimmed, lamp hung on a nail that held. Outside, heat softened toward honest cold. Silence arrived not as absence but as pressure, a steady hand against the chest. He counted breaths to ground the edges of old rooms that liked to reopen after dark. Rex circled twice, lay where he could see both door and Jack, and let sleep creep in on a short leash. Beyond the walls, the town seemed to lean closer, as if deciding whether to share or to keep. The dog lifted his head first, the way alarms do when they are fur and breath. Ears split the dark, nose wrote a report longhand. A low vibration rolled up his throat and died polite. Jack's eyes opened without hurry, pupils already knowing where to land. He stood,
stepped into boots and let the headlamp paint lines on plank and dust. Outside, the church bell gulped moonlight through a crack big enough to be history. A current of cooler air threaded from that direction, carrying something metallic, something stored too long. Rex pointed with body more than nose, a statue with a pulse. Jack let the night settle around them, measured distances, remembered ranges, charted cover as if training had never ended. The town held still, a held breath waiting to see who would break it.
Daybreak scraped rust into color. Jack ran a transect of Maine, notebook in hand, writing down nothing and everything. Door frames warped south, footprints baked soft on the livery's stoop, a stray tin star screwed into a beam without authority to back it. He cataloged rail spikes, cable remnants, a minecart wheel with axle freeze-welded by time. Rex worked grids, nose stroking low along thresholds, rising at corners that kept secrets poorly. Inside the saloon, wallpaper peeled like old bandages, revealing pencil marks that once tallied something loud. The bar mirror was silver cancer and fog. A floorboard near the center talked underfoot, 2 pitches higher than its neighbors. Jack marked it with chalk and stepped off, storing the loose cord for evening. Outside, the wind changed and brought the taste of damp metal. Motion in memory is louder than motion in air. Jack's mind ran a clip when the headlamp hit a certain angle. A corridor in another country stuttering with muzzle flash, concrete breathing dust into lungs, a radio chewing a half-choked call sign. He let it play through without flinching, counted to 7, and stored it. The store's back room steadied the present with mouse pellets and a folded tarp the color of old money. He taped black plastic over a shattered pane, knotted paracord across a doorframe, and filed small tasks like sandbags against weather you cannot stop, only slow. Outside, Rex's nails ticked cadence across boards. The dog paused, sniffed at the base of a shelving unit, and looked back with a patience that meant now would be good.
Morning grew its spine. The well sat where towns always put them, precisely centered between need and superstition. Around its stone ring, the dust had been fussed in a circle smoothed by more than wind. Rex paced the perimeter, toes planting clean ovals across the mess, nose carting tunnels the human eye could not see. Jack crouched, weighed impressions against his own boot pattern and tire marks from yesterday. A lighter tread cut across at a shallow angle. Not quite a sneaker, not quite a work boot, edges too clean for age. 2 days old at most, given last night's breeze and this morning's grit. He traced the line to a boardwalk post where a splinter caught on fabric and held a pale thread. The well throbbed cool from below, a throat clearing under stone. Rex chose a spot beside the general store stairs and began to work, paws slicing dust into neat piles with the competence of a job long practiced. The first inch gave nothing but bottle caps and a penny that had lost its president. The second offered compacted soil and a drag mark that predated both of them. The third clinked. He froze, glanced up, then resumed with precision, widening the circle until metal blinked through earth. Jack brushed carefully with a paintbrush from the glove box kit. A tin tag emerged, oval, drilled, stamped with numbers and a unit code that settled in the chest like a dropped wrench. The tag smelled of rust and sump, the way deep places remember. Jack turned it in the light until the characters squared into certainty. The past had filed a forwarding address.
The tag lay heavy in Jack's palm, edges chewed by corrosion, but the stamp still clear enough for a man trained to memorize sequences. He knew the prefix. It belonged to a marine logistics unit disbanded overseas, not anywhere near this dust-blind state. He turned it over, the back blank, then pocketed it as if it could leak meaning. Rex paced a slow circle, eyes tracking invisible ghosts. The veteran walked back to the truck, flipped open an old field manual, and scribbled the digits on the margin beside a memory of coordinates. Sun climbed, bleaching color from everything but questions. The tag felt too deliberate, planted where eyes wouldn't miss it if they were the right kind of eyes. Somewhere below that calm dirt, a story had been stored under government weight and forgotten until a dog's nose made it breathe again. Inside the saloon, dust held photographs to the wall with more loyalty than frames ever did. Faces wore uniforms, expressions cut from the same disciplined cloth. A banner behind them read, "Redwater welcomes Company B." The year stuttered off in a torn corner. Jack wiped a sleeve across glass, catching his reflection layered with the men. He counted 5 soldiers, 1 civilian, a dog with an open mouth in frozen motion. The uniforms matched the unit number on the tag. He stepped back, felt floor give slightly under left heel, noted a sound that wasn't age, but intent. Rex's tail swept low, his body pointing toward the stage where barrels once held whiskey, now hollow air. Beneath the boards, a resonance hummed like a throat swallowing truth. Jack knelt, pressed ear to wood, and heard faint mechanical teeth, metal thinking about starting.
He pried a loose plank with a tire iron found behind the bar. Underneath lay a canvas-wrapped box, corners rounded by time. He unrolled it onto the counter, cut through mildewed twine, and met the face of an old field radio. Buttons bloomed with rust, but still recognizable. PRC-25, Vietnam era. The cord ended abruptly, frayed into darkness. Rex sniffed, snorted, stepped back, the scent tasting like burnt circuits and long closed rooms. Jack connected a hand-crank generator from his pack, the habit of a man who still believed in manual proof. Static rose, a tide of ghosts. He turned dials until one note sharpened into rhythm, not voice but sequence, a tone repeating every 20 seconds. Frequency logs etched on the casing whispered numbers matching the tag. He shut it down, heartbeat syncing with machine memory. Someone had talked from here once, maybe still did. That night, wind combed through broken glass and made the saloon sing. Jack sat cross-legged before the radio, headset clamped like confession. Static washed through the skull until words almost formed shapes. Then, between bursts, a phrase threaded through. Testing Redwater. Stand clear. Clipped, distant, swallowed by interference. Rex lifted his head at the same second, confirming it wasn't imagination. Jack jotted fragments on a ration box lid, each one colder than the last. Testing meant purpose, not accident. Stand clear meant someone knew risk. He switched off, stared into dark where sound still hung, an afterimage of authority. The dog leaned against his leg, grounding him in fur and weight. Outside, a shutter slapped rhythm against siding. 3 beats, pause, 3 again, as if the town had adopted Morse to keep its secrets fluent.
Morning came brittle. Jack's reflection in the bar mirror looked like paperwork waiting for signature. He stepped out into light, thin as wire, eyes narrowing against glare that revealed what the night had hidden. Faint tire impressions crossed behind the church, direction outbound toward the hills. He followed to the edge of the old mining road, where gravel changed to powder and tracks disappeared under rockfall. The incline ahead was closed by a government-style gate, padlocked, sign faded to bone white but still legible in fragments. Quote, "Property, U.S. Access restricted," quote. Rex stood at his heel, nose twitching in subtle refusal. The air carried residue of oil and something acrid, chemical, the kind that rewrites breathing. Jack backed off, boots grinding measured retreat. In the distance, a crow screamed once, echo flattened by heat. A warning turned into punctuation. The mine's head frame leaned over the entrance like an exhausted guard.
Chain-link fence rattled under minimal wind, making its own language of warnings. Jack examined hinges, found them shiny where everything else dulled. Recent use, a maintenance crew that shouldn't exist. He traced the fence perimeter until a collapsed section opened just enough for a man and his conscience. Rex slipped first, body flattening, belly low, tail stiff, a ghost through wire. Inside the perimeter, half-buried steel drums lay stacked in threes, rust bleeding from lids. A number stenciled in white, CX92. He memorized it, a habit from years when memory meant survival. He placed a hand on one drum. Cold seeped through gloved leather. Beneath, soil glistened darker than surrounding dust. The smell climbed, a metallic sweetness that didn't belong to decay. His eyes watered, his dog whined low.
Jack tied a scarf across his face, a gesture learned when sand carried worse than sand. He opened a service door on the side of the shaft building, hinges compliant from recent oil. Inside, air hung heavy, flavored with iron and forgotten orders. He swept his flashlight along concrete walls marked with numbers and arrows. The tunnel ahead was tall enough for trucks once, now narrowed by cave-ins. He followed rails that vanished into damp shadow, boots echoing the way radio static had. Rex stayed close, paws padding without sound. A sudden drip somewhere became a pattern, condensation or something alive. The flashlight beam caught a sign, half melted into wall. Chemical storage, level 2. Paint had run down like tears. He reached the edge where floor sagged, saw glinting puddles breathing toxic colors, and felt lungs remind him to stop. Metal stairs descended to a lower chamber, half submerged. Jack shone light across barrels stacked like vertebrae, labels eaten, but still whispering danger in yellow triangles. The ceiling carried black streaks of smoke, not recent but permanent. The air shimmered faintly, invisible humidity that burned sinuses raw. Rex held back, tail under, ears slicked tight. Instinct beat curiosity. Jack backed up, counting steps, memorizing the descent for a day when he would bring masks, cameras, proof. Halfway up, he heard something shift below, slow pressure release, as if trapped gas exhaled relief. He didn't wait for confirmation. Once outside, he drew air through teeth, each breath tasting of pennies and remorse. The sign above the door creaked again, the word storage swinging like it wasn't done naming what it held.
The climb back to daylight stretched forever in seconds. Jack reached the open yard and dropped to one knee beside Rex, hands on fur, grounding against the faint tremor running underfoot. The dog's breath came fast, mouth open, pulling air as if tasting for clean. Behind them, the shaft vented a sigh, thin vapor rising and twisting into the sun. Jack watched it dissipate, calculating risk like altitude. The world didn't know it still had a leak. He marked coordinates in his notebook, snapped 3 photos with his phone, each one a slice of guilt and evidence. The wind carried the smell west, toward fields that didn't know they were downwind of ghosts. He stood, heart pounding in a rhythm older than fear, and realized the silence he'd bought now had a pulse. They retreated to the truck, doors sealing like containment. Jack sat without starting the engine, staring through windshield dust turned amber by sunset. His reflection merged with the view of town, a half-visible man inside a half-dead place. Rex lay across the seat, sides rising steady, head on pause, eyes half-lidded but alert. Jack scrolled through the photos, barrels, vents, the sign that still spelled out warning through rust. Each image carried weight, evidence that begged for daylight. He saved coordinates, encrypted the file, habit from years when truth was contraband. Outside, dusk folded Redwater in shadow. Somewhere in that cover, a story older than his discharge papers stirred again, patient and poisonous. The horizon swallowed the last light, and the dog's ears twitched toward the dark, catching what men forgot to hear.
By dawn, the world had cooled into brittle glass. Jack moved through it slow, mapping the town like a forensic pathologist at a quiet crime scene. The well still wore last night's hush. Dust resettled, except for a thin line of disturbed grit leading outward. He followed it past a collapsed barn to a patch of earth shallowly scraped, something roughly buried. Rex sniffed, dug 3 short swipes, stopped. The first handful of dirt gave way to metal once more. Dog tags, 5 of them, strung together with wire, names half-readable beneath tarnish. He washed them in his canteen's mouthful of water. Each belonged to men from the same unit as the tag in the photo. None were supposed to have died stateside. He folded the chain into cloth, pocketed it gently. The silence thickened, heavier now that it carried witnesses. Inside the church, light filtered through stained glass bruised by dust, coloring pews with the last remains of faith. On the pulpit lay a ledger swollen by damp. He opened it. Handwriting wavered between soldiers' neatness and desperation. "They told us it was harmless," one line said. Another page, "Coughing blood by second night, orders to stay silent." The ink broke where hands had trembled. The final entry stopped mid-word, pen dragged across paper as if pulled away. He closed the book, the gesture a small burial. Rex paced between pews, claws clicking rhythm in the sacred emptiness. The place smelled of iron filings and candle soot. Jack imagined briefings, promises, and the moment belief became obedience. The town wasn't haunted by spirits, it was haunted by signatures.
Sleep became interrogation. Every time Jack closed his eyes, the tunnel's breath filled the room, and the ledger's handwriting reached for him in the dark. His own pulse pounded like rotors overhead. He woke in sweat, boot halfway on, rifle grip empty, but remembered. Rex climbed onto the cot edge, pressing weight against his chest until breathing found rhythm. The dog's heartbeat replaced the phantom rotors. Outside, wind rattled window panes like gunfire in low gear. Jack stared at the ceiling and recited the names from the tags until they sounded like coordinates instead of ghosts. Dawn arrived slow, light leaking under the door like mercy that didn't quite believe itself. He rose, body heavy from memory's recoil, ready to turn the haunting into homework. Rex's ears pointed toward the street before Jack registered sound. Boots, not his own, scuffed gravel in the distance, then stopped, then started again. He killed the lamp, let the sun bleed in just enough to see. Through cracked glass, movement, a flicker between the general store and the old post office. The dog's muscles coiled without command. Jack's hand drifted to his belt, fingers finding habit instead of weapon. A shadow passed the window, thin, human, carrying a lantern's dim pulse. The rhythm of steps uneven, too slow for youth, too deliberate for panic. The figure vanished behind the church. Rex looked back once, question in amber eyes. Jack waited until the stillness reset, then followed, footfalls measured like patience carved in stone.
The figure emerged from behind a leaning cross, a woman shaped by weather, shoulders straight despite age. In both hands, she held the lantern as one might hold history, careful but unwilling to drop it. Her face wore creases that chose endurance over grace. She moved with the surety of someone who had walked the same path too many nights to bother fearing it. Jack kept distance, watching until she entered the church through its half-closed doors. When she stepped back out minutes later, she looked toward the general store window where he had been standing moments before. Eyes found eyes through space and dust. She turned the lantern down and walked his way, as if meeting what she had always expected to return.
She stopped 10 feet away, lantern low enough to keep shadows honest. Her gaze traveled over Jack, weighing story against stance, then drifted to Rex, whose tail hung still but steady. The woman's posture carried the quiet of ownership, the look of someone who belonged where no one else dared claim belonging. Her silence pressed as articulate as any question. Jack nodded once, a recognition between survivors. She lifted her chin slightly toward the mine's direction, then toward the church, the small gesture an entire conversation's worth of warning. Then she turned, back straight, moving toward a shack near the well. The door closed behind her, the latch clicking like punctuation to an unwritten sentence.
Curiosity replaced caution. Jack waited until morning light sharpened edges again, then approached the shack. A porch hung off it like an afterthought, chair, enamel basin, and a single pair of worn boots beneath. Inside smelled of cedar and kerosene. Walls papered with newspaper clippings yellowed into one long obituary of the town. Headlines: Local miner dies in accident. Federal investigation concluded. No hazard found. Dates spanned decades. On a shelf, a small framed photo, a younger version of the woman, arm around a man in overalls, both smiling beneath the Redwater sign. The same mine stood behind them, whole. He set the picture down. From beneath the floor came a soft thump, footstep or something shifting on its own. Rex's hackles spoke before sound confirmed it. Someone else lived under this roof of ghosts. A loose board lifted near the stove. From beneath emerged a hand, then the top of a wooden crate. The woman, the caretaker, knelt, pulling it free. Inside, neatly folded coveralls, a rust-stained helmet, and documents sealed in plastic. She set them on the table, then reached for a photograph of her husband, his name etched on one of the dog tags Jack carried. The implication hung heavy, connecting her quiet existence to the graves under dust. She traced a finger along the helmet's crack, stopped where the light caught something inside, a smear, dark and old. Rex's ears flattened, low whine threading the silence. The woman closed the crate and pushed it aside, the movement an act of containment, as if keeping grief from spreading. Jack stood in the doorway, understanding without permission.
Outside, wind dragged grit along Main Street like dry rain. Tire tracks cut fresh across it, still moist at the edges. Jack crouched to read them. Deep tread, dual rear wheels, heavy load. They led toward the mine road, the padlocked gate. He followed as far as the incline, noting where dust had been kicked from boot soles near the fence break. Rex sniffed each indentation, tail flagging higher with each new scent. Someone had been here recently, someone who didn't care to erase footprints. The padlock now shone newer than before, its steel throat unscarred by weather. Jack touched it lightly, feeling residual warmth from the sun, or from human hands not long gone. He backed away, watching ridgelines for movement, the desert suddenly too alive for its reputation. From a ridge above the mine, he saw them, a white van and two figures unloading barrels wrapped in black plastic. They moved with the practiced precision of men accustomed to secrecy, glancing often toward the road, but never toward conscience. One man wore a cap embroidered with a contractor's logo too small for civilian use, but familiar in design. Rex lay flat beside Jack, ears twitching, body tense, but silent. Through binoculars, he caught the flash of a sidearm at one hip, a clipboard at the other. A third figure stepped from the van, surveying with military posture. The operation was clean, organized, temporary, exactly how people erase evidence. Jack noted every motion, every label on the barrels. When one worker looked up toward the ridge, sunlight caught his face, and recognition hit like recoil.
The face below was not a stranger. It was one of his own. Jack blinked, and the years stripped away sand and rank insignia.
The man in the contractor's vest had once shared a trench and a bottle with him in another hemisphere. Now he moved crates with the efficiency of someone paid to forget. A taste of metal filled Jack's mouth. He watched as they rolled a barrel toward the entrance and vanished inside the shaft. Rex's tail twitched in microscopic beats. Every instinct asked for permission to act. Jack pressed a hand to the dog's shoulder, felt the tremor of restraint. The ridgewind curled around them, whispering the same order both had followed a lifetime ago: observe, don't engage. He swallowed anger into memory, photographing every step with the cold precision that precedes justice. An hour later, the van ground away in a brown wake of dust. Jack and Rex slid down the ridge, feet silent on loose shale. The mine yard stank of fresh oil. A small trail of black droplets led from the gate to where tires had turned. On the ground near a drum, a clipboard lay open, pages curling in heat. He photographed the header: Clearstream Environmental, Contract 14C, Redwater. Every field signed with initials that meant nothing until the bottom. Project Supervisor, Lawson, H. The sheriff's name. The circle of corruption closed neatly as a file folder. Rex sniffed the clipboard, then sneezed as if in judgment. Jack pocketed it and scanned the horizon. A lone hawk wheeled, describing orbits over crime scenes the law wouldn't see.
By evening, dust had layered everything in same-colored gilt. Jack parked behind the general store, typed a coded message on an old satellite phone that still caught a signal from higher ground. Raynor to Hale, found restricted site, suspect chemical dump, locals compromised, need extraction or exposure plan. He attached the photos, compressed, sent. The dog watched, head tilted as if gauging the worth of human systems. The response pin came 3 minutes later. Received. Confirm details. Sit tight. 2 words Jack had heard too often when sitting tight cost lives. He looked at the horizon folding into dusk and thought of barrels sweating under earth. Sitting tight now meant breathing poison quietly. He shut the phone off. The silence resumed its slow, disciplined crawl through the valley. Night painted the town in gunmetal. From the church steeple, a faint glimmer flickered, movement against shadow. Jack crouched by the store's doorframe, rifle slung, not pointed. Rex mirrored him, every line of muscle intent. Across Main, a figure limped from between buildings, half drag, half deliberate rhythm. The lantern bobbed, light grazing a face cut and bruised. It was the same man from the ridge, one of the barrel movers, now alone and injured. He collapsed against a porch beam, hand pressed to his side. Jack approached without noise, kneeled. The man's vest bore the Clearstream logo, darker with blood. His eyes fluttered open, saw Jack's dog before his mind caught up. Fear erased rank, leaving only truth's tremor. Jack pulled a first aid wrap from his pocket, not to save, but to keep him talking.
The wounded man's breath hitched in short, mechanical gasps. Jack checked the wound, deep, not fresh. Maybe from the cave, maybe from conscience breaking through. The man's hand gripped his sleeve, weak but insistent. Words spilled in fragments. Barrels, signatures, disposal, sheriff. Jack listened without reply, storing every piece. When the pulse failed, he closed the man's eyes, the small soldier's courtesy that never left. Rex sat a few feet off, watching the act with a quiet born from long field habits. The veteran lifted the body onto the porch shade, covered it with tarp. Death was a better witness than silence. It never changed its story. Somewhere beyond, thunder rolled, though the sky was still clear. The weather, like truth, was preparing to break. Storm front crawled in overnight, dragging a wall of gray across mountains. Jack used the rising wind to mask his movements. He buried the clipboard, the photos, and the tag copies in a metal ammo box under the church's cracked floor, back up for betrayal. Rex kept guard, tail sweeping dust into ritual patterns. Lightning jittered in the distance, giving brief X-ray glimpses of the landscape. The dog froze at each flash, muscles translating sound into mathematics of distance and threat. Jack admired the creature's calm,
the professionalism that outlasted every handler before him. The storm reached them in a gust of cold needles. Thunder folded the sky into the ground. Rain began washing the surface clean, but below, the corruption stayed dry and waiting.
At dawn, cloud cover pressed low enough to touch. Jack stood by the well with the sat phone again, shielding screen from drizzle. Hale's reply had come in the night. Coordinates received. Verification underway. Hold position. Evidence pending confirmation. Bureaucratic code for "you're on your own." He pocketed it, checked Rex's harness, tightened straps. The dog shook off water, eyes bright despite exhaustion. Together they crossed to the caretaker's shack. The woman, Martha, watched from the doorway, face shadowed, lantern unlit. She offered no words, just pointed toward a tin box on the steps. Inside, old photographs, mining crew, army trucks, sheriff's office banner. She had kept proof longer than the law dared. Jack nodded once, an exchange of respect between two keepers of inconvenient memories. Rain turned earth to mirror. Jack spread the photos on the store counter under flickering light. One image caught him, a group of men beside marked barrels, the same stencils he'd found yesterday. In the background stood a figure unmistakable, even blurred. Hank Lawson, younger, uniformed, handshake with a corporate man wearing a suit and an unearned smile. Proof enough to pull strings, if the strings weren't already coiled around everything. Rex paced restlessly, nails tapping code across the floor. Outside, a truck engine coughed to life, unfamiliar, but close. Jack killed the lamp. Through the slit of the curtain, headlights slashed the rain. The sheriff had returned to finish the story before anyone else could read it.
The truck idled by the church, exhaust curling like confession smoke. Two silhouettes climbed out, Lawson's broad frame and another, thinner, holding a floodlight. They scanned doorways, rifles slung with bureaucratic ease. Jack crouched behind the store counter, heart in drill rhythm, Rex beside him, a shadow within shadow. The beam swept past, caught briefly on a cracked mirror, flared, moved on. Voices muffled by wind, fragments of search orders, the word documents clear among them. The dog's breath slowed to match his handler's. Jack waited until Boots moved away toward the well. He slipped through the back door, into the alley soaked with runoff. Rain drummed on tin and skin alike, washing tracks, but not intentions. The town had become a chessboard of wet light and old sin. They circled wide through the cemetery to the Ridge Road. From there, Jack watched as the sheriff's truck backed toward the mine entrance, tailgate dropping, barrels rolled off into pummeled mud. A new padlock gleamed where the old one had hung. The law was burying the evidence deeper. Martha appeared at her doorway again, unafraid of the storm, holding the lantern high, its flame stubborn against wind. Her stance was an indictment. Lawson looked up at her, then turned away, face hidden under brim. The truck engine roared, drowning whatever prayer she whispered into the dark. Jack raised his camera once more, documenting betrayal as thunder peeled the sky open. Rex stood beside him, soaked, unblinking, the steady witness that every truth deserves.
The storm broke with morning, leaving the town rinsed but unclean. Water streaked down the boarded facades, darkening them like guilt made visible. Jack walked the length of Main Street, camera hidden beneath his coat, each footstep sinking into mud that remembered too much. The mine gate glinted with new chains. Tracks of heavy tires led toward the highway, the path of retreat for men who thought distance erased evidence. Rex sniffed along the puddled ruts, nose twitching as if reading invisible reports. Behind the church, the grave of the fallen worker had washed open, tarp peeled back by rain. Jack covered it again with a poncho, the act more ritual than rescue.
Somewhere under that ground lay one truth that couldn't be moved. Dead weight that the sheriff would never carry far enough. At noon, sunlight tried to make peace with the valley but failed. Jack brewed coffee on a propane stove in the general store's doorway, steam twisting up like smoke signals to no one. Rex lay with chin on paws, watching the road with the patience of stone. The veteran reviewed his photographs. Barrels, documents, faces, the sheriff's signature next to corporate logos. It was a story written in stains and pixels. He sorted files, creating duplicates on flash drives. One for himself, one for whoever would still care. The sat phone remained silent. Above, a hawk circled, tracing spirals over rusted rooftops, the sky its witness stand. Jack thought about how some wars never end. They just rebrand.
From the ridge came a faint pop, an echo too crisp for nature. Jack froze. Seconds later, another, duller, followed by a pause that the world seemed to hold its breath for. Rex was already up, facing north, tail stiff, every muscle tuned to direction. Jack shouldered his pack, checked sidearm, though he knew this wasn't a fight measured in calibers anymore. They climbed the incline to find a column of smoke crawling upward from near the mine. Someone was erasing faster than evidence could dry. The barrels, the shack, maybe even the dead contractor, flames consuming the record before the law could. The heat shimmered reached them long before the crackle did. Rex growled low, a sound that carried the same tone as memory. We've seen this before. Jack photographed from distance, smoke, trucks, silhouettes. Through the haze, he recognized one vehicle from earlier, the sheriff's, but another joined it now, black SUV, government plates blurred by mud. Two men in suits watched from the ridge, arms folded, communication devices at their ears. Coordination, sanction. The fire wasn't cleanup, it was protocol. Rex shifted, uneasy. Jack backed down the slope. Knowing to survive meant vanishing until daylight changed sides. They retreated through gullies carved by runoff, feet slipping in silt that reeked of chemicals. Each breath carried the ghost of something burned that shouldn't have burned. Behind them, Redwater's heart beat smoke into the sky, a final broadcast of everything it had tried to hide.
They spent the night in a dry arroyo east of town. Stars flickered through torn cloud, each one dimmer than the sparks from the burning valley. Jack slept in short bursts, dreams cluttered with frequencies and ledgers, men calling for medics who never came. Rex stayed awake longer, ears filtering night noise for approach. At dawn, the dog nudged his shoulder, urging movement. Smoke still veiled the horizon, thick but losing fight. Jack dug a small pit, buried the remaining flash drive, mapped coordinates on his forearm with ink. Insurance. Then they hiked toward the county road, where civilization pretended ignorance. The wind shifted east, carrying the scent of burned chemicals over wheat fields. Innocence traveled faster than justice. By afternoon, they reached a fuel station, a slumped rectangle of neon and solitude. The attendant eyed Jack's mud-caked boots and the dog's uniform posture, but asked no questions. People who live near ghosts learn to trade silence like currency. Jack topped off the truck, paid cash, and bought a folded state map from a rack that hadn't been touched in years. He traced roads, identifying the nearest federal office with jurisdiction. Miles of canyon between him and someone required to listen. He circled Helena, then another point deeper in mountain territory. When he turned back to the counter, Rex was staring at a bulletin board plastered with missing person notices. Miners, hikers, one young man in a clerk's uniform. The name below it, David Miller, last seen in Redwater region. Proof that the town's appetite wasn't new.
They followed the highway north, asphalt unwinding beneath tires like magnetic tape spilling secrets. Jack replayed every coordinate, every face, until names began to line up with motives.
Clearstream was the new alias for an old weapons contractor, one that had shifted from bombs to waste disposal. Same ethics, new stationery. The sheriff's partnership wasn't greed, it was debt paid in land and silence. Rex leaned against the window, head high, eyes scanning the verge. The radio offered nothing but static. Jack realized he preferred it. Truth always started in static. The road signs counted down miles like a clock. He rehearsed what he'd tell the agency: contamination, falsified deaths, federal fraud. He'd deliver it clean, clinical. He wouldn't mention the ghosts. They weren't evidence, just witnesses. Near sundown, a checkpoint appeared, a pair of black SUVs parked across the road, men in tactical uniforms waving traffic to detour. Jack slowed, assessing angles, escape routes. A portable sign read, "Hazard spill ahead, authorized personnel only." The story was being rewritten in real time. He turned the truck onto a dirt spur before reaching them, tires whispering through sage. Behind hills, the highway disappeared. Rex watched the mirror until the uniforms shrank into dust. They stopped under a stand of juniper. Jack marked another set of coordinates on his map, the circle tightening. Each detour was a scar line around truth. He realized whoever orchestrated this didn't need to kill him, they just needed him disbelieved. Silence weaponized again, the cleanest cover story ever made.
That night they camped on a ridge overlooking distant Helena lights. Jack built no fire. The dog lay beside him, head resting on boot, eyes open to the dark that never tired. From this height, civilization glittered like calm water hiding sharp rocks. He composed the report on his tablet, stripped of emotion, loaded with data. Photos, serial numbers, map overlays. Before transmitting, he hesitated, thumb above the send key. Somewhere below, men in offices would read this and measure it against politics, not ethics. He sent it anyway, not for them, but for the ledger he kept inside. Rex exhaled long, a sound between sigh and growl. The wind answered with the faint clank of unseen chains, the mind's ghost breathing across distance. The reply arrived near midnight, screen glowing blue against the dark. Report acknowledged, extraction pending verification. Bureaucracy's lullaby. Jack closed the tablet, leaned back against rock, and looked east where the first hint of dawn bruised the horizon. Rex stood, ears forward, sensing movement long before sight. Below, two sets of headlights crawled the canyon road, unmarked, deliberate, slow. They weren't rescue, they were cleanup. Jack touched the dog's collar, whispered a breath that wasn't words, and packed quick. The war he'd tried to leave had simply changed uniforms. He shouldered his rifle, the old weight fitting like apology. The dog moved first, down the slope, into shadows thick enough to hold them. Behind, the light kept coming, steady, methodical, as the world prepared to erase Redwater again.
They slipped through the canyon's ribcage, silent as smoke. The valley below shimmered with the slow crawl of approaching engines, white beams slicing fog like scalpels. Jack counted intervals between the lights, trained precision measuring pursuit. Rex led through sagebrush, ghost gray against darker ground. Rocks shifted beneath boots, but made no noise above the hum of distance. The dog stopped once, head high, scent reading the direction of intent. The air had changed. Diesel, cologne, bureaucratic violence. Behind them, floodlights painted cliff faces in interrogation white. The ridge where they had slept was swallowed by light, then by flame. Jack kept moving downhill, lungs burning in rhythm with heartbeat. Every step, another erasure survived. Above, thunder rolled without clouds, the artificial kind born from detonation. Dawn fractured across the desert, thin and colorless. Jack reached a dry creek bed and followed it until the noise faded. His boots left shallow impressions that water would soon erase. Rex drank from a puddle no wider than a helmet, tail wagging once before settling to rest. The veteran watched the dog's steady breathing, the only rhythm in a world gone mechanical. He opened his map again, marked the new path northeast toward Helena, then tore away the section containing Redwater. The act felt like cutting infected tissue from flesh. Wind lifted the torn paper, carried it across the barren plain until it disappeared. What remained was cleaner but smaller, a future built from subtraction.
The highway reappeared by afternoon, a gray vein stitched through tan skin. Jack waited until a freight truck passed, then merged behind it, the old Ford hidden in its wake of dust. The radio murmured a news report about a chemical accident near Redwater, the official version now public. Casualties unlisted, investigation underway. The voice sounded calm, professional, lying by habit. Jack turned the volume down until only Rex could hear the ghosts of static. The dog's ears flicked, unbothered. Truth had always lived in the background noise. On the horizon, city towers shimmered like promises, glass teeth biting into a blue sky that didn't believe them. He drove toward it with the resignation of a man delivering evidence to a machine built to shred. Helena's outskirts spread in sterile grids, streets too clean for their stories. Jack parked beneath an overpass, swapped license plates from a cash box, a habit no longer of paranoia, but routine survival. Rex waited in the shade, calm and watchful. Above them traffic hissed, a white noise that almost disguised the heartbeat of unease. Jack changed jackets, shouldered his pack, and walked the dog along the drainage path into the city's quiet belly. Skyscraper glass mirrored clouds, refusing reflection of men who didn't belong. They moved through alleyways smelling of ozone and old coffee, each step a measured incursion. In his pocket, the flash drive pressed like a pulse against thigh. Truth condensed into a weapon smaller than fear.
Federal offices rose like orderly tombstones downtown, logos etched into steel. Jack approached the least conspicuous, a gray building that blended with its own weather. Cameras blinked, doors inhaled him in a gust of recycled air. Inside smelled of toner and bureaucracy, desks arranged in perfect rows, each holding lives measured in reports. He slid the envelope across the counter, a package addressed to the Environmental Crimes Division, containing the flash drive and copies of his documentation. The clerk stamped it, unaware she was holding evidence capable of cracking a county. Paper over poison, the ritual of every nation. Jack turned, feeling lighter only by illusion. Rex followed, nails ticking marble rhythm like a countdown. Outside, city light fell through storm glass in fractured lines. Jack walked until distance turned government into background hum. He stopped in a public park where grass grew over buried utilities, sat on a bench, and watched ordinary life rehearse itself. Joggers, laughter, phones glowing like small suns. Rex lay at his feet, eyes half closed but scanning. The quiet felt earned yet temporary, a lull between waves. He reached into his pocket, found the original dog tags from Redwater, the first evidence, the first ghosts. He dropped them into the shallow pond beside the bench. Ripples erased their shine. Water closed over names that had finally found rest. Some memories deserved burial, not justice.
Rain returned by evening, soft and gray, washing city grime into gutters that led nowhere pure. Jack and Rex walked beneath it without hurry. Every droplet carried a metallic taste that reminded him of the mine's breath. He wondered how many other towns had been scrubbed from maps under the word accident. The dog shook water from his coat, untroubled, resilient. Together they moved through neon reflections that bled across wet asphalt, the scene too cinematic for anyone to believe was real. The veteran's silhouette blended with streetlight haze, part ghost, part witness, part tired guardian of truths no court would hold. Behind them, traffic whispered a lullaby for the dead. Days turned without change. News cycles consumed the Redwater story, feeding it through headlines until it emerged flavorless. No evidence of wrongdoing, one article read. Another promised environmental recovery underway. Jack read none of them fully, truth diluted was worse than silence. He and Rex settled near a scrapyard outside town where trains slept under rust. There, silence was honest again. He repaired engines for cash, built small order from discarded metal. Rex patrolled the perimeter, his gait steady, tail low, guarding what could still be trusted: boundaries, loyalty, breath. Each sunrise came cleaner than the one before, as if the desert itself was relearning how to breathe without permission.
One afternoon, a package arrived. No return address, federal seal. Inside, a brief letter. Acknowledgement of receipt, confirmation that investigation was ongoing. Standard closure language. Beneath it, a printed photo. The mine, now fenced, warning signs restored, no trace of fire. Evidence sanitized into compliance. Jack folded the letter, fed it into the oil drum stove, watched it curl into flame. Rex watched too, head tilted, as if gauging the temperature of futility. Smoke drifted upward, thinner than the Redwater kind, almost gentle. For the first time, Jack didn't chase its meaning. Some wars end not in victory, but in exhaustion. Summer settled over Montana like forgiveness that had to be earned. The scrapyard bloomed with weeds pushing through rust. Jack sat on a hood of a dead truck, Rex beside him, both facing the sunset that painted wreckage gold. The horizon burned in quiet colors, the kind of fire that healed rather than destroyed. A breeze carried the scent of sage and rain, clean enough to almost believe in redemption. The dog leaned against his leg, eyes closing, body heavy with peace. Jack's gaze lingered on the distance where Redwater once stood, invisible but not gone. Beneath that dirt lay 100 untold truths, and above it, silence, finally honest. The veteran exhaled slow, the dog's tail tapped twice, and together they watched the light die softly, as if the world was promising not to forget.